No discussion on collection views is complete without talking about two very important features: handling item selection and editing the entire collection view. Let's dive into these topics by adding one last feature for your users: the ability to delete emoji from their library. As has been the theme so far, the collection view doesn't actually handle input on its own. It delegates this responsibility to, well, its delegate. That is, any object that conforms to the UI collection view delegate protocol. Earlier, you created a delegate object to act as the delegate for the flow layout. In doing so, we also created a delegate for the collection view. Navigate to emoji collection view delegate.swift and command click on the UI collection view delegate flow layout declaration. You can see that UI collection view delegate flow layout inherits from UI collection view delegate, which is the protocol you need to handle cell selection. If you command click on UI collection view delegate and jump to the definition, you'll see that it has quite a few methods. Up at the top are methods for cell selection and deselection, along with comments on the order of which they are executed. Below that, there's methods for copy-paste actions, custom transitions, and focus. This object clearly does a lot. Let's go back to emoji collection view delegate and test this out. Since you've already wired up this object with the collection view, you can implement the methods you need to test it out. Let's add a comment marker in here to separate all of these different protocol methods. The method you want to implement is collection view did select item at. So you can just type did select item at and autocomplete. This method is called after a user has selected an item. To see this in action, print the index path for now. Build and run the app. And as you tap each cell, you should see the index path of the cell printed out in the console. Sweet. For your delete feature, whenever a user taps on the cell, we're going to change the background color to red to indicate that this cell is going to be deleted. But what about the segue you added earlier? Right now, when we tap on a cell, well, it takes you to the detail view. We want to keep that behavior. Instead, you'll only allow a user to delete emoji when the collection view is in editing mode. To set the collection view to editing mode, you need to add an edit button. Let's do this in code. Navigate to viewcontroller.swift, and inside viewDidLoad, add Alternatively, you could drag an edit bar button item object from the object library in the storyboard and set it up there. But tapping that button won't automatically do anything. In code, we get some behavior for free. Build and run the app. You should see an edit button in the top left corner of the nav bar. When you tap on edit, it should automatically switch to done and vice versa. In addition to toggling the button between edit and done, the button is also invoking the set editing animated method on the underlying view controller and sets the view controller's is editing property. You can use this to modify the segue behavior. So let's add a method to view controller. Well, we'll place this right here above prepare for segue. We'll say should perform segue. This method is called before any segue is triggered. You can prevent all segues from being performed by simply returning false from the method, or you can prevent individual segues from being executed by checking the identifier argument. Let's check for the show emoji detail identifier and prevent the segue from executing if the view controller is in editing mode. build and run, and we'll tap on a cell to verify that the segue still works. And then we'll go back, put the collection view into editing mode by tapping the edit button and verify that the segue does not work. Alternatively, you could have handled this using a different approach by delegating the work to the collection view delegate. Right now, the segue you added is triggered automatically via the storyboard. Segues can also be triggered programmatically using the perform segue with identifier sender method. Navigate to emoji collection view delegate and add a weak property that references the view controller. So the top, say weak. Now, using this view controller property, you can selectively perform the segue when the cell is tapped. So inside the did select item at method, this is also a perfectly valid approach, but you're going to stick with what you have. Speaking of collection view did select item at, another approach you could take is to set the background color of the cells during editing mode. You can use the index path argument to get the cell at that spot and change the background color of the content view. So we'll get rid of all this. Build and run the app. And you'll notice that while this does work, it also sets the background color when not in editing mode. And then when you go back from the detail view, the background color is still red. So instead of asking the delegate to keep track of all the selection state, let's get rid of this code and then house that code in the cell subclass instead. So we'll go back up, delete this as well. Navigate to emoji cell.swift and add two properties. The first is to keep track of whether the cell is in an edit state or not. And second, technically not an addition, is to override the isSelected property, which is already defined on the class. You don't want to modify the property. Instead, let's add a didSetObserver. And if the cell is in editing mode, then you'll switch the background color based on whether the cell is selected or not. Let's go back to the collection view delegate and remove the didSelectItemAt method altogether. Even though you didn't use the delegate method here, it's important to be aware of it since any feature that requires input will probably make use of the delegate. Navigate to viewcontroller.swift and override the setEditingAnimated method. When the view controller goes into editing mode, you'll cycle through any visible cells and set their editing states appropriately as well. The first thing you need to do is call the method on the super class. Collection views have a property named index paths for visible items that is an array of index paths for all the cells on screen. Let's iterate over each one and set the editing mode. Before you can set the editing mode, you need to cast the cell to our subclass. Build and run the app, and you should be able to set the view controller to edit mode. Okay, so you should be able to set the view controller to edit mode right here. Next, we'll select the cells. There you go. They get highlighted in red, and you should see that background change to reflect this selected cell. There's one tiny snag though. If you hit the Done button, that cell is not deselected. So let's fix this. Collection views have another handy property, index paths for selected items. You can iterate over this array, and for each index path, call the deselect item at animated method. This is going to set the cell's selected state to false, and we should get the color change we need. Let's build and run the app and verify. Okay, we hit edit, select a cell, then hit done. There you go. Wow, you've done quite a bit of work, but really all of it has just been UI work. You're no closer to being able to actually delete items. In the next video, I'm going to leave it up to you to implement the delete logic as a challenge.